Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura-kisora. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Ram Hare Hare. Jai Srila Prabhupada. So, continuing our reading in the pastimes and biography of Gaura-kisora Das Babaji. And this is section 27, the atonement for adultery. A few days after the previous incident, a person called Purnavan came to see Srila Gaura-kisora Maharaj Das Babaji and begged him to allow him to stay in one of the Dharmashal rooms. The proprietors of the Dharmashal kept all the rooms on the northern side under the control of Srila Babaji Maharaj. Himavan was permitted to stay in one of these rooms. Srila Babaji Maharaj told him, within the hearing of others, "He who wants to perform Hari Bhajan will not associate with worldly people. Those who secretly contemplate accepting such bad association while making a show of good association, or who associate with religious hypocrites, develop sinful tendencies. I've seen many thousands of people ruining themselves by taking recourse to hypocrisy. Tolerating many troubles patiently, if one constantly hears and chants in the association of Vaishnavas, he can maintain his worship of the holy name." Even after being so instructed, Himavan used to secretly converse with hypocritical religionists. Babaji Maharaj, upon considering this, became extremely angry, and shortly thereafter, Himavan became seriously ill. Seeing his suffering, the supremely merciful Babaji Maharaj asked one of his attendants to serve him. After a few days, it was observed that the young man came and began tending to Himavan. The omniscient Babaji Maharaj came to know of this and asked his servant, "Who's serving Himavan?" Servant replied, "I'm serving Himavan. No one else is doing so." Babaji Maharaj demanded in a deep thundering voice, "Is anyone else coming to him?" At this, the frightened servant admitted, "Yes, a woman comes to him." When Babaji Maharaj received this confirmation, he instructed the servant, "As that woman is coming to serve him, you should not go to him any longer." Babaji Maharaj called for Himavan and informed him, "If you want to stay here, you'll have to pay me 15 rupees. If you cannot afford to pay 15 rupees, you should go somewhere else, because if you happen to die, the money will be required to meet the expenses of your cremation." After this, Babaji Maharaj sat quietly to himself. "If I do not let this man stay here, the woman will inevitably take him to her house. This is her desire, and she will then be able to nurse him at her ease." After suffering for a long time, Himavan was cured of the disease, and he then left for Vrindavan. Srila Babaji Maharaj ignored him and offered no resistance to his going. Having journeyed to Vrindavan, Himavan stayed with Damodar Das of Kushama Sarovara. The Damodar Das was well known to Babaji Maharaj. After circumambulating the 12 forests of Vrindavan, Himavan went to Damodar Das one day and said, "In the garb of a Vaishnav, I've committed adultery. Please, tell me how I can save myself." Damodar Das said, "You must give up your life. Apart from this, there's no atonement. This is what has been prescribed by Mahaprabhu." Himavan had a few grams of opium brought from Govardhan and took it. After ingesting the opium, he perspired profusely and, trembling, came to Damodar Das and informed him that he had taken opium with a view to giving up his life. After taking repeated doses, he lost his life. Simultaneously, Damodar Das was attacked by a deadly disease. At that time, a certain Goswami was in Vrindavan. He arranged for Damodar's treatment and helped to save him. As soon as Damodar recovered, he returned to Navadvip and came to see Srila Babaji Maharaj. Seeing him, Babaji Maharaj warned him, "You stay somewhere else. If you stay with me, you will lose your life, because there are 2 dacoits nearby. One is Narendra and the other is Larai. Professing to be my servants, they have made propaganda with my neighbors that they are staying with me. Where they stay at night, I do not know. Once, in the dead of night, I called for them to bring me a glass of water. I shouted for a long time. There was no response from them. Following morning, when I mentioned this to them, they said, 'We didn't hear a thing.' Thereafter, being ignored by Babaji Maharaj, Damodar took shelter in the house of a certain young woman. Hearing about his activities from others, Babaji Maharaj became furious and said, 'Don't speak about any of this in my presence.' Another hypocrite in the dress of a Vaishnava had also lived at Kushama Sarovara with Damodar. He was similarly rejected by Babaji Maharaj. A story was related that during the night, several dacoits took out his eyes and cut his body to pieces. People said that the duplicitous fellow had stolen goods with him which he had kept well hidden. He was cruelly murdered by the dacoits on that account. These incidents vividly illustrate the danger of posing as a Vaishnava, but secretly associating with materialists and committing sinful activity. The young man who went to Vrindavan, associated with sinful persons, and fell down with a young woman, was unjustly advised by the hypocrite, Damodar, to commit suicide. Damodar suggested an atonement which he himself could never have performed, and for an evil act he later indulged in himself. Although suicide is sometimes prescribed as the atonement for such misbehavior on the part of a sannyasi, and was approved by Mahaprabhu in the case of Junior Haridas, taking recourse to the constant chanting of the holy name is generally considered sufficient atonement, provided the malefactor is prepared to give up his evil ways. At any rate, it can be easily concluded that from these incidents, that sinful activities conducted by someone dressed as a liberated Vaishnava have particularly grave consequences. Of course, it should not be imagined that it is hypocritical not to indulge in the sinful things one may desire in one's impure heart. If one feels unable to decry that evil with which he is yet afflicted, then he should keep silent but steadfastly refuse to succumb to it. One derives no benefit from the association of Mahabhagavatas if he does not heed their advice and associates instead with hypocritical religionists. No good will be availed to one who is insincere in his assumption of the dress of a Vaishnava and his renunciation of the world. On the contrary, such insincerity is productive of great misfortune. Those who are hypocritical in their dealings with Srila Gaura-kisora Prabhu were ruined as a result of committing the offense of deliberately maintaining material attachment while chanting the holy name. Section 28. Gaura-kisora Prabhu and Maharaj Manindra Chandra. Knowing that Babaji Maharaj was a superlative Vaishnava and the spiritual master of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the famous Zamindar of Kasim Bazar, Shri Manindra Chandra Nandi, invited Srila Gaura-kisora Prabhu to a Vaishnava conference, which was to be held at his palace. Moved by the invitation of the Vaishnava king and with a heavy heart, Srila Babaji Maharaj responded, "If you want my association, you will have to leave your property in the hands of your officials and come and reside here. You must dwell on the bank of the Ganges River at Navadvip in a thatched hut with me. You won't have to think of procuring food. I shall personally feed you by begging alms. Thus I shall be obliged to come to your chanting compound. Thus I shall be obliged to come to your chanting compound for your daily invitation. But if I presently accept your invitation and leave the transcendental Gaura and go to stay at your royal palace, then in no time I shall consider myself your competitor. As a result of this, I shall attempt to acquire land and property. This will create a great obstacle to my Krishna bhajan, and the desire to worship the objects of the senses will arise in my heart. In the course of time, I shall become envious of a Vaishnava king. Naturally, if I want to maintain everlasting love and friendship with you, and if, as my Vaishnava friend, you sincerely wish to show kindness to me, then it will be our bounden duty to stay at this transcendental place of Vishwambars, maintain our lives by the activities of Madhukari, and always remain busy in worshipping Lord Hari. Another account of this incident and Babaji Maharaja's response to the king's entreaty is as follows. The Maharaj of Kasim Bazar, the late Manindra Chandra Nandi Bahudrar, tried with great effort to take Srila Babaji Maharaj to his Kasim Bazar palace, but his desire was not successful. When the Maharaj's man went to Babaji Maharaj and said that by the order of Maharaj he would take Babaji Mahasaya with great care by palanquin to Krishnanagara, and from there by first-class train to Kasim Bazar, Srila Babaji Maharaj replied, "If I go to the Maharaj's palace, I may become greedy for wealth, and due to that there would be a possibility of strained relations with the Maharaj. Let him give over all his worldly possessions to his relatives and officers and come to me. I shall have a boat cover like mine made and give it to him for a dwelling place. Together we shall blissfully perform Hari Bhajan." Seeing no other means, the Maharaj man left. Babaji Maharaj was, of course, perfectly realized and aloof from all material temptation. Yet he graciously warned the non-liberated devotee by his humble example of the danger of accepting materialistic association or excessively opulent facilities. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu voiced similar warnings in his dealings with Maharaj Prataparudra. Initially, he had nothing to do with the king. He would not even meet him, saying it was improper for a sannyasi to meet with a materialistic person, despite his knowing the monarch to be an elevated devotee. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's adherents exerted themselves to arrange meetings on the king's behalf, but Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would not agree. Eventually, the king came to him, stripped of his royal attire, dressed as a mendicant, and reciting verses from Shrimad Bhagavatam, and thereby received the mercy of Mahaprabhu. Regarding associating with mundane people, Srila Prabhupada comments in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, although outwardly the king was a mundane man, interested in money and women, internally he was purified by devotional activities. He showed this by engaging as a street sweeper to please Lord Jagannath. A person may appear to be a pounds and shilling man, interested in money and women, but if he is actually very meek and humble, surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he's not mundane. Such a judgment can be made only by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his very confidential devotees. As a general principle, however, no devotee should intimately mix with mundane people interested in money and women. Section 29. Secret Immoral Behavior. There was a certain Pandit Babaji of Kulia who wore only a loincloth as his dress. This Pandit Babaji was a much respected person whose secret immorality wounded the feelings of Srila Gaura-kisora Prabhu. As a result of this, Babaji Maharaj left aside his loincloth and outer garment one day and dressed himself in a fine dhoti and chadar. Having attired himself in the manner of a dapper materialist, he went to see Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur at Sevananda Sukhada Kunj. The Thakur, beholding him in this unexpected dress, asked him why he was so attired. Babaji Maharaj replied, "We have adopted the dress of Sri Chaitanya, but privately we do not hesitate to commit adultery. Hence it is better for us to dress like the husband of a prostitute than to assume the guise of Sri Chaitanya and commit adultery secretly. In this way we will at least be free from hypocrisy. Another version of this incident is found in Prabhupada Srila Saraswati Thakur. Seeing the wretched condition of the monkey-like renunciants, Srila Babaji Maharaj arrived one day before Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur at the Shri Sevananda Sukhada Kunj, wearing a beautifully bordered dhoti and shawl. Seeing the crest jewel of possessionless saints in that dress, the Thakur became extremely amazed. Srila Babaji Maharaj said, "It is 1,000 times better to put on the dress of a well-to-do gentleman than to wear a loincloth and secretly perform immoral behavior. Not only in the countryside villages, but even in the Gaudiya Vaishnavas' very famous holy places. What outrages, what mischiefs are being carried on by these monkeys? They forget. I will not do it if you just vibrate the sounds. It will not do if you just vibrate the sounds. I am gores with your mouth. If Gaura's behavior and deliberations are accepted, then results will fructify. If you only wear tilak and worship Gaura to show off to other people, while secretly acting immorally, Gaura detects your theft." Section 30. Result of offense committed to the Acharya. A certain Ayatra Punya lived at Mayapur for a few days, and then he departed. Shortly thereafter he brought alms from Mayapur to Navadvip and went to take darshan of Babaji Maharaj, who resided there at that time. Babaji Maharaj inquired from him about Mayapur. In reply, Ayatra Punya remarked, "I will not go to Mayapur any more, because that Saraswati and others there are Vaikuntha men. They're interested in the Aishvarya mood. I prefer bhajan in the mood of Raj. I'm not interested in their association." Hearing this, Babaji Maharaj felt disgusted and said, "It's ridiculous for a sparrow to attempt to cross the ocean. If you're really serious about living in Vraj, give up your criticism. Be lowly and humble like the grass, and always chant the holy name of the Lord day and night. The first and foremost principle is that you should give up offensiveness at the feet of the Vaishnavas. Do you think you will get information about Vaikuntha from hell? Saraswati Thakur is in Vaikuntha, and he is in Vrindavan as well. You are presently in the lap of the witch Maya. How will you know the Saraswati of Raj?" At this rebuke, Ayatra Punya said, "I will live with you in Navadvip." Srila Babaji Maharaj said, "You are not in a position to live at Navadvip. One who commits offenses at the lotus feet of Vaishnavas cannot live in Navadvip. You're an offender at the feet of transcendental Mayapur. You are sure to become degraded." "I live at Mayapur and Navadvip as well. Those who detest living in Mayapur will never be able to live at Navadvip. Sri Mayapur is the birthplace of the son of Sachi. It's a transcendental abode. You don't possess the eyes to see how Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Saraswati Prabhu have exemplified the performance of Hari Bhajan with pure ecstatic emotion. You're inimical to one Vaishnav and pray to another for mercy." Thereafter, it actually came to be, as predicted by Babaji Maharaj, that the aforesaid man became atheistic and indulged in illicit intercourse with women. He was begging alms and purchasing expensive gifts for various women with whom he had illicit connection. Such is the result of committing offenses against great personalities. Section 31. Sensuous people view the world with lust. The aforementioned Ayatra Punya went to Srila Babaji Maharaj one day and criticized an intimate and elevated associate of Babaji Maharaj. "He whom you consider a soul of great devotion and addresses Prabhu is showing signs of attachment to the objects of the senses. There is every probability he'll become a horrid materialist." Hearing this, Srila Babaji Maharaj became so grave and silent that those who were nearby were frightened by his mood, and they requested Punya to leave the place immediately. Srila Babaji Maharaj's attitude that day had been aptly expressed by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. The actions and character of a Vaishnava are always pure. One who criticizes a Vaishnava commits offense. Bhaktivinoda does not speak to one who criticizes a Vaishnava and thus maintains his silence. When Punya departed, Babaji Maharaj spoke in a trembling voice in his direction, saying, "This wretched fool has become lustful for material things. By assigning his own Mishnav to a Vaishnava, he indicates his own condition. A Vaishnava never becomes materially attached except to render service to Krishna. A person who has the least attachment for material objects can never develop love and devotion for Krishna. That one has the symptoms of natural love and devotion cannot be clearly understood without exhibiting great attachment to the objects necessary for his service to Hari. He who is greatly devoted to Srimati Radharani and Shri Krishna shows a great natural attachment for objects favorable to their service. Such attachment is not for the purpose of their own enjoyment or for that of their family members. Seeing their attachment, which is greater than that of materialists, to worldly objects necessary for serving Krishna, the so-called renunciates and sensualists think that the affectionate devotee is merely attached. In fact, those who are without such sincere attachment, their show of devotion to Krishna is nothing but hypocrisy. He who privately speaks ill of a Vaishnava should be avoided. I shall not look upon the face of that wicked man again."